Hello?
Hi, everybody. We are just waiting for the facilitators to kickstart the whole session. So let's just bear with them for a couple of minutes.
Okay,
No problem. We're here waiting.
But can you check on us? Can you hear me?
Yeah, very well, actually.
You can, okay. Thank you very much.
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
Even see you.
Yeah, I can see all of you, but it's in Kampala.
Oh, that's Kampala.
Yeah, how is your place, man? How is Corona there?
Oh, we are getting there. Just taking care of ourselves and trying to be safe as much as we can.
We are doing very well. You are doing better than us. We have problems here. Telling you. Sorry, I missed last meeting. I didn't get early notification.
Which meeting was that?
The previous one. Did you have one more meeting? Did you have a meeting last time?
Oh, we are always having meetings.
Yeah, I've been missing them. I get late. I get late invitation. Yeah,
I see. Okay. Just make sure that you check the boxes that can enable you to get the invitation every time there is a meeting.
Thank you very much. That's okay. Thank you.
Right.
Again, good afternoon, everyone. And we will start in a few minutes.
Good afternoon.
Okay, good afternoon once again, everybody. And you are very welcome to this webinar on tracking and reporting on progress on climate action under the Paris Agreement, regional exchange on national MRV systems from Eastern and Southern Africa region. And my name is Sana Ahonen, and I'm from the UNFCCC region.
Sana, you are muted. Okay. You're muted.
Okay. So as I was introducing myself, my name is Sana Ahonen from Regional Collaboration Center in Kampala. And as the RCC, we are working with our host partners in supporting, facilitating and catalyzing local and regional climate action in the UNFCCC Secretariat's substantive areas of work in mitigation, adaptation, finance, technology and capacity building. And this webinar is the second in its series. We started with a webinar on standardized baselines in the end of June, after which we also asked the webinar participants from a number of topics, which would be their preferred one for our next webinar. And national MRV systems got the most votes. So here we are, and it is also a very current topic since through the Paris Agreement, we are moving from the previous MRV system to the enhanced transparency system. And yeah, in this webinar, we will hear from a number of colleagues from UNFCCC Secretariat, from UNEP, UN Environment Programme, from World Bank, and we will also have 3 case studies from Kenya, Rwanda, and Eswatini. Then some housekeeping. So we have the slides and event guide available in our event website. That is also for your use. If your bandwidth does not cope with the incoming video, I would suggest you just turn the video off and follow the slides from your own laptop. And then a big one, please keep yourself muted and your video off unless you are talking. But for the speakers, I would like to ask for you to turn your video on when it's your time to talk. And from the photo, you can see how you can mute yourself in Microsoft Teams. This webinar will be recorded, and the recording will be made available afterwards. And then lastly, for the interactive part of the webinar, we will be using Mentimeter. So please have another display in hand, maybe your mobile phone, or you can also do it in another window on your laptop. And you could already go to www.menti.com. And with this, I will hand it over to my colleague Suri, who will run you through the Mentimeter part of the webinar.
Okay, I'm just here. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me just adjust the screen a little bit. Okay, so I think everyone can see. First of all, good afternoon. Yeah, I'm the regional lead at the RCC Kampala, and it's great to have so many of you with us this afternoon. And just before we get into the main part of the webinar, we do this ice-breaking session with some interactive questions. So if you have, the best result would be if you have a telephone or a tablet in addition to your computer, and you navigate to this menti.com, and then it'll ask you to enter a code. If you're particularly savvy, you can also just scan the QR code. So I'll just give you a couple of moments to navigate through that, and then we can begin. So I'll already go to the next screen, but don't worry, you'll still have the code and the web address there. So the first question is, we'd like to get an overview of our audience in terms of what part of the world you're calling in from. So you can go to your telephone now and just start indicating there what country it is. So I see 8 people have already responded. Let me show what's happening here. There we go. So Uganda seems to be quite popular, which is nice to have so many locally. I see only 12 people have responded so far. I guess people are still looking for their typing in the code, finding the web address. Last I looked, we had almost 50 participants. I'll just let it run a little bit longer. We're getting a few more new different countries, but Uganda still seems to be, Uganda and Kenya and East Africa seem to be most popular. So again, welcome. Great to have you all with us. So I'm going to move to the next slide now. We'll ask which sector are you from, so government, or maybe you're representing an NGO. You can refresh on your telephone. Now that I've brought up the new slide, yeah, I've lost the list now on the side, but UN family, financial institution. So we have a real mixture of participants today, which is nice to see. A lot also from the UN. Welcome. And so I think about half of the participants have now managed to enter the system. So I'll take it through to the next slide. But good to see such a diverse audience today. So now a little bit more specifically to understand, especially for the speakers, what level of experience or contact you've had with MRV systems. Maybe you're a bit of a novice and hasn't had much contact with MRV systems. I would categorize myself towards this end of the spectrum. But then we have also other categories. And in this one as well, you can enter more than one. So it's not limited to just one answer. You can tick more than one. All right. You see the results coming in, and again, it seems we have quite a wide spectrum, as with the sectors that the audience is joining from. Also with the level of experience with MRV, it seems quite a good spread with experts and novices alike. So that's really nice. I hope there's going to be a little bit of everything for the participants today when the technical people start speaking. So I'm just going to go to the next slide. One last one came in. Okay, so this question is a little bit more specific, targeted at the colleagues here in East or Southern Africa. And we want to understand how well do you think your MRV system is developed in your country. So again, we have a spectrum from the work hasn't really started right up to that the MRV system is well established and running well. So it would be really interesting to know what you think about your own country's MRV system. Of course, if you're not from East or Southern Africa, but you know one of the countries here in the region very well, or you work in one, have worked a lot in one of the countries in the region, please feel free to participate as well. So fully established and running well is still on 0. It looks like a few more people coming in, but yeah, it looks like quite a few in the middle, nascent stage or decent but work in progress. And I think in a way it will always be a bit of a work in progress as improvements are made. But I think that also indicates that the webinar today will be quite relevant, particularly for those that are in the nascent stage or the work hasn't even started. I hope we learn a lot. So I'm going to navigate to the next slide. So final question now. We'd like to know, especially from the countries in Eastern or Southern Africa, what are some of the main challenges with the MRV or problems? And we've given quite a few options there, and you can select more than one. So I'd invite you to start selecting any of the challenges that you've been experiencing. And here they come. So it seems that the lack of staff and institutional continuity and the capacity constraints, which are rather interrelated issues, seem to be one of the challenges that are faced by quite a few. Also, of course, the lack of finances there. I'm heartened to see that the unclear UNFCCC rules is lower than the others. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this part of the icebreaker and the first Mentimeter questions. But from here on, I'm going to load the question and answer slide. And in the background, if you have any questions during the next couple of presentations, we'll do the question and answers at the end, and you'll see me again at the end. So for now, I'm going to hand over to Sana.
Thank you, Suri. And so we will now move on to our presentations. And while I introduce you to our first speaker, Mr. Marlan Pillai, Marlan, you could already turn your video on. And yes, so Marlan is a colleague from the UNFCCC Secretariat in Bonn, where he has been serving since the year 2010, at the moment as a program officer in the Mitigation and Transparency Implementation Support Unit. But he has served in the Secretariat in different capacities, such as with the Clean Development Mechanism and Joint Implementation, and also supporting the climate change in the governmental negotiation processes, and supporting developing countries to enhance their capacities to meet the reporting commitments under the Convention and the Paris Agreement. And Marlan will be speaking of the national MRV systems in the context of the UNFCCC and Paris Agreement. So I will give the floor to you, Marlan, and kindly, if everybody else could mute themselves and turn their videos off. Thank you.
Marlan, I think you're still on mute.
Okay, thank you, Suri. I forgot about the mute. Okay, so thank you, everyone. Good afternoon to you, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed a pleasure for me to be with you here today and to discuss this very important topic and that is that you may be deliberating on in your teams and with your colleagues in this field of tracking and reporting of progress on climate action in terms of the Paris Agreement. Okay, so I have a few slides to share with you today. And because of bandwidth, I'm just going to turn my video off, but move to my slides. Okay. Sorry, shall I share my screen?
Sure, that might be easier, and then you can drive it yourself. Go ahead, Marlon.
Thank you. Okay. Can everyone see my presentation?
Yes, it's there.
Okay,
yes, I
great.
can see.
Okay, so thank you very much. So yeah, as Sana just mentioned, my name is Marlon Pillay, and I started work in the Secretariat about 10 years ago. So I've been involved in both the CDM process as well as for a number of years now in the reporting process that's national communications and biannual update reports, as well as on the development of the enhanced transparency framework and the modalities, procedures, and guidelines. And so today I'm going to give you an overview first of the current MRV arrangements, and then we will delve into Article 13 of the Paris Agreement on transparency. And then I want to share with you some timelines towards implementing the ETF MPGs, and then some information on the key provisions on the ETF MPGs, highlighting areas where institutional arrangements should be enhanced and why. Okay, and then I will end with a few takeaway messages. So first, let's have a brief overview of the existing MRV arrangements under the Convention for Developing Country Parties. So you see in front of you on the screen a process, and this process is from our UNFCCC MRV handbook. And what it highlights is the various decisions that has been made from 2002, 2011, and 2019 regarding the MRV arrangements. And yeah, in this slide, you will see that parties first decided on submissions of national communications way back in 2002, and they developed a set of guidelines for that. And within those guidelines, there was mention about establishing institutional arrangements to support the collection and reporting of climate change information. And so, yeah, so this is where it started. And then later on in 2011, parties then also agreed on the submission of biannual update reports, and they developed guidelines for that as well. And there were some key areas that these biannual update reports needed to provide information on. And this was provision of a GHG inventory report, reporting on mitigation actions and their effects, and then reporting on the domestic MRV system and any financial, technology, and capacity building support needs and support received. And you will see that in this process as well, there was inclusion about information as a technical annex on RED plus activities. And these are activities where parties were engaged in projects or programs on reducing emissions from forests and deforestation and forest degradation, and as well as conservation and sustainable management of forests and enhancing the carbon stocks in forests. So in terms of results-based payments, that information was submitted as an annex to the BUR. And together with this annex, the BUR was subjected to an ICA process. And this is an international consultation and analysis process where the BUR was subjected to an analysis by technical experts, and thereafter a facilitative sharing of views process where other parties to the convention were allowed to ask questions or clarifications to the party that submitted the BUR. So yeah, there is some further details about the domestic MRV system, and these were information about whatever voluntary actions were taken in terms of nationally appropriate mitigation actions that the country was doing on their own accord. And now let's move on to Article 13 of the Paris Agreement. So Article 13 was what we call an enhancement to the current MRV arrangements that was put in place. And you will see there are three main components here. One is about reporting. The second is about a technical expert review process, and thereafter a multilateral facilitative consideration of progress process. And so the first one covers what information parties need to report on. And you will see here there is some shall, should, as appropriate requirements, right? And this is a key difference from the previous MRV system, where there was a lot of may, should, and encouraged requirements. And you will see that whatever information that has been agreed in terms of Article 13 to be submitted, this would be subjected to a technical expert review process, where a group of technical experts will review that information, and then that information will be subjected to some discussion or clarifications between the party that submitted the information and other parties that are parties to the Paris Agreement. And what is key to note here is that Article 13 talks about flexibility. And this flexibility is with regards to specific provisions, and it is with regards to flexibility awarded to developing country parties that need it in light of their capacities. And this Article 13 also recognizes the special circumstances of least developed countries and small island developing states. Now, why this is important is that as you go about strengthening your institutional arrangements, you may find the necessity to use some of these special flexibilities and special circumstances to help you to meet the reporting deadlines with regards to submission of information under the Paris Agreement. And now this next slide is about timelines. And I just wanted to share with you some important information from this. First, you will see that the Article 13 still requires submission of the technical analysis of RED Plus as part of what is now the biannual transparency report. And this biannual transparency report will replace biannual update reports. But your NCs, your national communications, still remain the same, submission of national communications. And so your final biannual update reports is due no later than 31st December 2022. And your first biannual transparency reports are due no later than 31st December 2024. And of course, there is some discretion on this submission awarded to LDCs and SIDS. So least developing countries and small island developing states. Okay, so in my next slide, what I want to talk to you about is that Article 13 went through a process of negotiation by parties. And in December 2018 in Katowice in Poland, the parties finally concluded those negotiations to develop the modalities, procedures, and guidelines. And we call this the ETF MPGs in short. And this is what it means is that it provides the details of what is in Article 13 and what is required from parties to submit, and then what processes. It describes the processes of the technical expert review and the facilitative multilateral consideration of progress and how parties will participate in those processes. What is key here for you with regards to institutional arrangements is these two aspects. One is the need to identify, regularly update, and report on areas of improvement. And then the provisions, which is mostly mandatory. And what this means is that you will see that in terms of collecting information on your climate actions to report, you will have more child requirements, and that means you would need to collect more information. And in some cases, the depth of information that you already have has increased. So you might need to collect not only extensively, but more intensively. And so you would need institutional arrangements that would support the collection of that information, but also the management of that information to analyze it and then prepare a report as your biannual transparency report to submit to the UNFCCC. And you would also, if you are engaging in continuous improvement, you will need robust institutional arrangements to be able to identify those areas where you feel there needs to be improvement. For example, the collection of data for preparing a GHG inventory, emissions inventory. You might need to identify, okay, which sectors do I need to enhance my institutional arrangements so I can start reporting better on that sector. And now I want to share with you some information about what is in the ETF MPGs. And you will see that all parties need to submit a national inventory report, information on tracking progress in implementing and achieving its NDC, and information on climate change impacts and adaptation. And this developed countries need to provide information on the support provided, financial technology transfer and capacity building, and developing countries need to provide information on the support received, right? Needed and received. So all these aspects is going to need some robust institutional arrangements for you to be able to collect this information. Let's look at it in a little more detail. Now you have here the National Inventory Report. And you see that one of the requirements in the ETF modalities, procedures, and guidelines is that the reporting shall include information on institutional, legal, and procedural arrangements. So they want to know what setup you have in place to collect information that feeds into your National Inventory Report. And here you can see that some of the depth of the changes relative to the previous MRV system. Now it's become mandatory to use the 2006 IPCC guideline. So you might need to collect more information. For example, like on methodologies, on the gas and categories, on emission factors, on activity data, etc. And you see there's now 7 gases to report. So now you would need to expand your existing institutional arrangements if you have not been reporting on other gases before. Okay, and the same can be said about the requirements for tracking progress made in implementing and achieving NDCs. They also ask for information on the institutional arrangements. And here you can see why, because now they ask for you to describe your NDC, to provide information that is necessary to track progress, to provide information on your policies, actions, and plans for mitigation, and to make some summary and projections of GHG emissions and removals. Now, in order to do this, you need to engage a wide range of stakeholders on a continuous basis, and you would need institutional arrangements to be put in place to govern who does what, who is in charge, and what type of institutes there are in the country that are collecting data, that their functions could be expanded to collect more information that can help you with reporting for NDCs. And here you can also see that when you look at tracking progress of NDCs, you need to have institutional arrangements in place, not only for reporting of NDCs, but also for accounting of NDCs and communicating NDCs. And so it's the same for climate change impacts and adaptation. Although this is a should requirement, they also ask for some information about institutional arrangements and the legal frameworks that is in place that govern the actions that you take with respect to climate change adaptation. And the same can be said about support provided and mobilized and support needed and received. You also need good institutional arrangements to be in place. Now you will see that the requirements ask you to do a more comprehensive collection of data on the climate finance flows within the country. So you may need to look not only what is at national level, but also what is at provincial level and what is happening at local municipality level with regards to climate finance. And so you'd need to provide that climate finance, technology, and capacity building. And then good institutional arrangements or robust institutional arrangements will help you participate in the technical expert review process. In this review process, you as a party will engage with technical experts. They will ask questions, and perhaps then you would need to go back to some of your stakeholders. That's part of your institutional arrangement setup to get information to be able to respond to the technical experts. And so robust institutional arrangements will help you in this process, and it will also help you in the FMCP process, where other parties may ask questions as well. And then you may want to prepare answers using those stakeholders that are part of your institutional arrangement setup. So in closing, what I'd like to leave with you, some key messages, is that true to the spirit of the Paris Agreement, the enhanced transparency framework builds upon and enhances the existing MRV arrangements that's put in place. And you have seen now that the extent and depth of some of the provisions in the ETF MPGs compared to the BOR guidelines, it calls upon the need to establish robust institutional arrangements within the country. Now, it's also important to say that one should not look at what you have in place and then decide to leave that and start again. It's important for you to look at what you have already built and how you can enhance your existing institutional arrangements to meet your reporting provisions with respect to the ETF MPGs. Now, there's a number of success stories that you can draw inspiration from. We hope that now presenters later on today will share some of that with you and some of their lessons that they've learned, and you can benefit from their experiences in transitioning to the enhanced transparency framework. Now, when you establish enhanced and institutional arrangements, you know that there is some key factors, and some of these I've highlighted here. The next presenters will provide some information on this as well. Ownership of that institutional arrangement setup will be important. It's important also to have high-level champions in the political sphere that promote the establishment of institutional arrangements for climate change reporting. And you will need access to financial support, technical support, capacity building support for you to develop robust institutional arrangements. My colleague Stanford will share with you some of the support activities that you have access to, that you can request. And if you want to find some further information on the enhanced transparency framework modalities, procedures, guidelines, I have been involved in supporting the consultative group of experts in developing a technical handbook. We have just published that handbook, and it's freely available to you, so you can understand further some of these provisions and then how it impacts your existing institutional arrangements. So I would like to leave it there, and say thank you to everyone for your attention. And I'd hand over back to Sana. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marlon, for that very interesting and insightful presentation. And so I would like to remind all the participants that please keep your Mentimeter still logged on, because you can actually submit your questions through that. And we will have a question and answer session at the end of the webinar. So at any time you can send questions to us, and we will then address them all at once. And next, I would like to introduce to you our next speaker, Mr. Stanford Mwakasonda. And Stanford is a program management officer with the United Nations Environment Program and responsible for managing the Global Support Program, which is a joint program of UNEP and United Nations Development Program, with the objective of providing technical support to developing countries in their national reporting commitments to the UNFCCC. And in addition to that, Stanford is a member of the consultative group of experts and a lead reviewer under the UNFCCC review program for Annex 1 countries, and also a member of the Clean Development Mechanism Executive Board Registration and Issuance team. So a man with many hats. I will hand it over to you, Stanford, and just also let the participants know that from now on, Stanford will take over the moderation.
Thank you very much, Sana. I appreciate the introduction. And I understand I am to share my screen for the presentation. Okay, Sana, just let me know if you can see the presentation.
That's good.
Great. Thank you. So once again, good afternoon, everybody. It's really nice to see we have quite a big crowd of participants interested in what is going on, especially in the regions of Southern Africa and Eastern Africa as well, in terms of MRV systems. My colleague Marlon talked quite extensively on what the countries are supposed to be doing, what are the main issues with regard to the upcoming reporting systems. And he mentioned that with all that the countries need to do, there is support that is provided. One of the organizations providing support is the CGE, of course, but we also have the Global Support Program, which it has been mentioned to be a joint program between UNEP and UNDP. So I would like to just give a very short synopsis, especially for those that are not very familiar with the Global Support Program and what exactly it is, what it's doing, how does it provide that support. So we are a joint program, we are a joint project funded by Jeff, and our main objective is basically to provide technical support to the countries and making sure that they meet their reporting commitments to UNFCCC. And we provide support in preparation of national communication, preparation of BUR, and to some extent, we were involved in the INDCs, and we are now involved in the ANDCs in terms of what countries can do to get ready. And of course, when I mention the national communications BUR, what I mean is that it's these reports plus all the components of the reports. And usually we provide support on demand basis. So basically countries can actually get in touch with us to say we need this particular support, and then of course we respond. But at the same time, we do have some surveys to determine what are the capacity gaps, what are the capacity needs in the countries, as you will see in my later slides. And we are governed by an advisory committee, which is composed of members that are drawn from the from UNEP, UN Environment, from UNDP, from UNFCCC, from JEF. From JEF, we have the chair of the from CG. From CG, we have the chair of the CGE as a member of this committee, and as well as of course from JEF. Now, in terms of approach, how do we provide, what kind of approach do we use to provide the support required to the countries? So we have different ways. For example, we can have regional and national workshops depending on what are the identified capacity needs. So we can either organize a regional workshop, but sometimes it can be an in-country workshop whereby we send a team of experts to the countries to address issues that the countries is facing challenges with, and of course to try to make sure that they understand the dynamics of whether it's a GHG inventory preparation, team, or whether it's mitigation assessment, V&A, etc. But we also publish guidance materials. We have a lot of guidance materials by way of publication. If you visit our website, you should be able to see quite a number of them. And then, of course, we review reports. Once countries are ready, they have draft reports. For example, it's NC, it's GHG inventory report, it's V&A report, and they need at least some quality assurance, good quality assurance before they submit it to the UNFC. So we provide that services of going through the report with them and making recommendations, suggestions on how to improve the quality of the report, because this has been quite a challenge, for most of the developing countries for a number of years. So now we are really trying to make sure that in the reports that are eventually submitted to UNFCCC are of very good quality. And then sometimes countries that want to work with international consultants, we do work with them in terms of trying to identify the right people, to make sure that, whatever input they are going to be providing to the countries is also of high level quality. And sometimes our training events, we do joint training events with other organizations in order to, of course, we all know that sometimes there's a lot of duplication. So to avoid that, sometimes we do joint events with other partners. And of course, our key partner in most of the training is UNFCCC, but it's not really just a ring fenced to us and UNFCCC. We do work with quite a lot of other partners, including other UN agencies, to make sure that we provide this support to the countries. And then, of course, we try to put a mechanism for countries to share information, to share knowledge, best practices. And this is by way of, for example, webinars like the one that we are having right now. And then, of course, I mentioned our website where you have an abundance of information about different things. And sorry, there is something that is blocking. Okay. And we also provide online training courses. We developed online training course modules, and whereby these courses can be facilitated. We have been working with organizations that provide this kind of service, or they can be sort of self-moderated, whereby you just access the online course, and then of course you see how, for example, you can learn on a particular the thematic area. But at the same time, in terms of approach that we use, we kind of came up with the idea of what we call regional MRV networks that we saw were quite instrumental in facilitating technical cooperations and the capacity building, by clustering countries. And this is something that I'm going to talk more about, because what we have now during this webinar is basically two of these networks coming together. We have the Southern, you have seen actually we are talking about Southern Africa and Eastern Africa. These are basically two networks that are part of the networks that we established to try to provide the support to developing countries. Really that we should have this approach whereby we cluster countries into what we call regional MRV networks. What are the objectives? The issue was to just facilitate exchange of knowledge, generally on any of the MRV issues. and therefore have a very effective platform that GSP could use to make sure that we provide support to the countries in an effective way, and sometimes, of course, inviting partners like you have seen with this one, to provide that services so that we do joint activities. And that, of course, one of the objectives was also to create awareness, with the national institution responsible for MRV, because we really felt that by going the network route, we kind of get closer to the countries rather than having once-off training events in terms of workshops. And of course, even within the networks, we are trying as much as we can to facilitate peer reviews of national communications, of BORs and their components, meaning that sometimes those reviews can happen when we have, for example, these regional events, whereby countries within that particular network can help each other to look at one country's report and say, come up with the comments as a group to say, maybe based on our experience, this is what we did, and maybe you might want to use a similar approach. So this was basically the objectives of having the MRV networks. But we also saw some advantages and benefits, especially to the participating countries. One of the advantage that we saw was, when you cluster countries according to geographical locations, countries that are neighbors, etc., there is a very high degree of geographical, economical, environmental, and institutional similarities in the region. So we thought that these are countries in this particular network that can talk probably the same language. You have an Eastern Africa, for example, MRV network, which involves countries like Kenya, countries Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda. You would actually immediately see that these countries have some historical relationship, basically, that goes many years back, and therefore having a platform that brings them together, works quite well. And then, of course, we also realized that countries usually in these regions usually have similar constraints, similar capacity gaps, and therefore it's very easy to replicate solutions that you provide to one country in the region to the next country. And then, of course, like I said, the networks will be taking advantage of already established collaboration initiatives. For example, in the Southern Africa, you all know that there is SADC, and then in the Eastern Africa, there is East African Community. So we thought that, okay, by going network route, we can piggyback on some of these established collaboration initiatives. And then, of course, the geographical proximity, which brings an economic advantage. You can imagine when you organize workshops and you have to bring together countries from North, from South, from Central Africa to a location maybe in Nairobi. There are implications in terms of cost, in terms of tickets, in terms of flying people to the venue. So we thought that actually this somehow overcomes that cost element when you are organizing events within a particular the MRV network in the region. And then, of course, effectiveness of capacity buildings when you are working with a small group. Because you see, the alternative would be maybe to say you have a regional workshop that involves all countries in Africa. You become quite a big group. But with networks, for example, the Eastern African network has 10 countries. The Southern Africa has 12 countries, if I remember correctly. So then you are dealing with the smaller groups. And we thought that actually, and we have experienced that, is far more effective when you are dealing with the small groups. And of course, you are trying to impart capacity. And then there is an issue of continuity, because this is basically compared to when you have once-off training workshop whereby you organize a 3-day workshop, everybody comes, and once the workshop is over, everybody goes home. And that's it. You forget about the participants until maybe 2 years down the line, or probably 1 year down the line, when you hold another workshop, and probably the participants are going to be very different from the ones that you invited during the previous event. So with the networks, we maintain that communication. In fact, the members of these networks will tell you that they get lots of communication from us, because it's not just a platform. No, it's a kind, you develop some kind of a family that actually is dealing with capacity building. So there is constant and regular communications with the group to the extent that when they face particular challenges, you are very very aware of what is going on. When they reach a certain stage in the implementation or preparation of the NC or BUR, you are very much aware of this. And there is constant feedback from the countries within the network. And then, of course, the wider reach of beneficiaries, because, like we said, you organize a very large workshop, probably the maximum you can invite number of people is 2 from each country, sometimes only 1. But this regional networks, because now we are dealing with fewer countries, But what exactly are these regional networks collaborating on? What are they collaborating on? Okay, so like I said, it's usually MRV, for example, institutional arrangement, capacity building at regional or bilateral level, on institutional arrangements, expert collaboration. This basically means that I can get, for example, an expert from Burundi to go to Rwanda and assist with certain elements of probably their GHG inventory work, from South Africa to Eswatini, something like that. Or, for example, you can have joint events like webinars, like the one that we are having it here. As I already mentioned, that we have 2 networks that have come together for this particular webinar. And then, of course, in terms of other areas, usually we leave this decision to the countries themselves. When we initiate the networks, of course, the countries can agree what else they need to collaborate on. But of course, the generic area of collaboration is MRV and institutional arrangement issues. But if they feel, no, there are other issues to do with our reporting commitments that we want to bring into the picture, then of course they are very free to do that. And like I say, this collaboration is supposed to go beyond capacity building. There are issues of peer-to-peer reviews. This is not capacity building. This is basically work. There are issues of sharing information, good practices and success stories. Marlon mentioned that, and this is exactly what we are doing. And some of these good practices we publish on the GSP website. There are also issues of if, for example, the region decides, for example, let's say Southern Africa, where there are a couple of countries with coal mining there. If they decide that, we want to have a joint research in determining the regional emission factors, regional specific emission factors, they can actually decide that, let's do this as a collaborative, activity. So, and then of course, it's easy. Once you are involved, engaged as a regional network, it's very easy to do joint mobilization for support of resources. So these are some of the areas of collaboration. But then how do we operationalize the regional MRV networks? They are supposed to be informal in nature. So we don't have formal structures where the regional networks will employ people, they will employ the secretary. No, these are very loose, informal networks that just bring together technical people. And they get backstopping by GSP, by UNFCCC RCCs, by UNFCCC Secretariat, because when we organize events, then of course we all come together just as we have done, for this particular webinar. And then of course, it's not a closed family. If, for example, I've mentioned this, if other partners wanted to join in, then they are most welcome to do. And we have done this quite a number of times, like, for example, with organizations like GIZ. And then, of course, in operationalizing the networks, usually what we require of the countries is to send an acknowledgement letter, which of course will say, yes, we are part of this. And then, of course, they appoint 2 national focal points. This will be the contact point for us to reach the countries. And usually these are NC and BUR coordinators. So remember, I said that it's very technical, so we prefer to engage with technical people. So the NC and BUR coordinators, most of the time, there will be the national focal points, but if need be, then they can appoint somebody else who is a technical person to be one of the national focal points. And then, of course, there is this issue of ownership, whereby, for example, you say network coordination by the country members. This is something that we are considering, but it's something that we might want to implement in the future. For now,
sorry, Stanford, I think you are
is centrally done by GSP, of course, in collaboration with the UNFCCC. Collaboration principles. This is important. Collaboration principle as well as, for example, activities in this governance and communication and net funding. So these are some of the issues that go into the terms of reference. But in terms of collaboration principles, this is important because, one of the first principles is team spirit. We all want to play our part in the network to make sure that we achieve the goals and objectives. At the same time, in the network, we want to recognize that there is national ownership of country information. So if you bring your national communication, for discussion, for review, it doesn't mean that we take ownership of that. No, the owner of that information will still be. And then, of course, issues of mutual benefits and partnership among equals, whereby, there's no country that will pretend to be a big brother. And then, of course, you have other countries that are like, okay, you're the small kid here. No. So this is supposed to be partnership among equals. So there are no conditions, no conditionalities. And then, of course, the complementarity issues, whereby you have this, I don't have that, get that from you, those kind of, that kind of collaboration. And then, of course, we are voting to the largest possible extent, talking about negotiation positions, because that's not the intention. We don't want to go political and start arguing amongst the members. No, so it's not about negotiation issues, it's just about technical issues and, of course, respect of national sovereignty. Okay, so these are basically the networks, and this is the total nexus in terms of the GSP regional networks. You can actually see there are networks that are coordinated by UNEP for the first 7 there. These are under UNEP. The ones in green text are the ones that are part of this webinar. So we have the Eastern Africa MRV network and then the Southern Africa MRV network. And then we have other networks, there are 5 there, that are coordinated by, remember I said GSP is a joint program with UNDP. So these other 5 are coordinated by our colleagues at UNDP. So for example now, I just wanted to give you a picture of when we meet as a network. One of the things that we do every time we meet is to take a stock of what are the capacities in the countries, in individual countries, and then these are sort of collected into regional capacity needs. So you say, okay, so what are the challenges in terms of capacity in your individual countries? So the countries will list this. We say in terms of priority. So these are our challenges. These are the areas, the gaps where we feel that we really need capacity. And then once they have done that, we collect, all these country capacity needs into regional needs. And then once we have done that, we come up with a training program. Sometimes it's just for 1 year, sometimes it can extend to 2 years. So for example, the last event we had for the Eastern Africa MRV network, these were the issues in terms of priority that were identified. For example, almost every country said that they needed training on GHG inventory development and compilation, including the IFCC software. This is important because later on we'll see that in terms of activities now happening in the region, it has relevance to that. And then they also talked about adaptation indicators, and of course how you track adaptation progress, etc. So you can actually see in the list, you actually go in terms of what is the priority. And then of course on the right, on the right, training forum, we can agree as a network, as an MRV network, the countries can agree whether this can form a theme for the next regional training event. Or sometimes you can just say, yes, this is great, but it's basically, it has to be country driven. For example, essentials of framework and procedures for having robust national MRV system and national arrangement. So this cannot be a theme for regional training. We say, okay, so how can we help countries, to actually achieve this, but from a country-driven perspective, rather than bringing the countries together? Because sometimes it's just because it's different scenario for each country, and therefore you can't have one size fits all in those particular issues. So this was for the Eastern Africa. We did the same for the South, whereby they didn't have very many issues that they wanted to address the region. But once again, you see that GHG inventory and GHG software, was key for them. And then, of course, there was an issue of AFOLU, especially the land representation, land classification issues. They felt that this is quite a challenge, which of course we can understand, with the uniqueness of, land classification in countries like South Africa. And then, of course, the V&A issue once again comes up. And then, of course, there's an issue of mitigation assessment, scenario projection, and modeling tools for both mitigation and adaptation. So this is how countries come together. And of course, these were developed from individual country training needs, and then they were, sort of cascaded into regional training. Okay, now, based on that, so what are the activities that are happening now? You see, now we just say that, okay, for example, GHG inventory. Alan talked about, for example, in the next phase of reporting, countries are supposed to come up with more detailed national inventory report. So basically, this is what we are doing with the countries. We have, we were supposed to have in-country training, we were supposed to have regional training events, but because of the Corona challenge, we couldn't. But we didn't say that, okay, we are just going to sit back and wait until the Corona challenge is over. So we are doing video training now. So this we do on the individual country level, whereby we talk together, we train on, what are the key issues when you want to prepare terms of reference for a GHG inventory. What is it that has to go? Because the aim here now is to have a report that will commensurate the requirements, the SHA requirements that Malan talked about, in the next reporting framework. Says these might not be issues that are SHA requirements or mandatory requirements now, but we actually do this with a view to the next reporting framework, ETF basically. So we are doing this, helping countries to do the full-fledged, and then we are doing webinars. Of course, these are like ad hoc. Sometimes we decide, okay, I think we need to talk about this. Of course, we also align those webinars to what was discussed as training needs in the regions. And then, of course, the mitigation issue assessment. I think remember that. Okay, we can't do face-to-face training workshops. So what we are doing now is actually to prepare an online training, training modules for mitigation assessment. And of course, at the same time, we are continuing to provide review, the quality assurance aspect of national communication, BUR, GHG, all the components of reporting. And then, of course, the GHG inventory, training online. Okay, this we stopped doing because this was taken over by UNFCCC. So we just, communicate and support countries in making sure that they take part in the one that is being run by UNFCCC. And then, of course, right now, countries, in fact, today, I remember, have already received. It's not September. It's now August. This has been pulled, forward. So there is an NC and BUR status, which we work in collaboration with Jeff, to just assess where are the countries in terms of implementing these projects. If they have an NC project, if they have a BUR project, okay, where are they? When do they expect to submit the project? What are the challenges they are meeting in preparing this project? That also fits into the training needs for different regions. And then, of course, we also, in the questionnaire, we ask countries in terms of effectiveness of the support provided by GSP and other partners. You can actually see that it's very similar between Eastern Africa and Southern Africa, because it's the same issues that are going on in these two regions. Okay, so I think that brings me to the end of the presentation. Thanks very much for your attention. And I understand there will be a question and answer session, and there's an arrangement for that. So if you have any, please use the arrangement that has been mentioned to you to actually jot down some questions. Otherwise, thanks very much for your attention.
Thank you very much.
Back to Sana. Okay, sorry. I just remember that I'm supposed to continue as a facilitator now, right?
Yes, exactly. That was the idea, Stanford.
Okay. All right. Okay, so in that case, let me stop sharing my screen. Great. So now I've talked about what countries are doing, the support we provide to countries, and the things that they have to do within their countries. So now is the time for sharing of experiences in implementing effective MRV systems through the presentation of practical examples from the countries in Eastern and Southern Africa, networks. And in terms of
Sorry, Stanford, to interrupt, but let's hear from Mr. Harry Gade from the World Bank first, and then go on to the country presentations.
Yes, that's right. No, I'm very much aware of that. Okay, so before we do the country experiences, yes, before the country presentations on the experiences, I would like to also we would like to hear from the World Bank, the World Bank's view on supporting development of national MRV system. Okay, so that will be the first presentation before we go to individual countries. Now, I'm going to have 4 presenters. So we'll have Harry Gade from the World Bank. Then after that, we'll have Ivoni Kabi from Kenya, the pair from Rwanda, then eventually Ketiwe Kumaro. But like I said, let's have a perspective of the World Bank on development of national MRV systems by Harry Gade. Now, who is Harry Gade? Harry Gade is a senior climate change specialist in the carbon markets and innovations practice of the climate change group in the World Bank. He has been working on climate change related issues, especially on carbon markets and carbon pricing for more than 15 years. So he has quite a lot of experience in that particular area. And he's one of the leading members of the Article 6 work program for piloting next generation of carbon markets. But now what he's going to tell, I think the best we can do is to give him the floor, and then of course he can share his thoughts or thoughts of the work with us. Please, Harry, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much, Stanford. Can you hear me clear, loud and clear?
Yes, I can hear you, and I believe the rest of the audience can hear you.
Yes, and I guess.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, you can also see my screen. Yeah, okay. Thank you so much. Yeah, again, thanks to RCC Kampala and UNFCCC for this opportunity and the invitation once again. So what I'm going to do very quickly, actually, as part of my presentation, in the interest of the time, and also we have 3 more presentations to go. I'm going to talk about the work that World Bank is doing and some of the lessons that we learned with implementation of MRV systems. So most of the work that we are doing right now is through the initiative called Partnership for Market Readiness. Some of you may know about that particular initiative where we are helping countries to implement carbon pricing instruments. And of course, there is also work that we are doing under Climate Warehouse Program, especially related to Article 6. So my presentation basically talks about a little bit the things that we are doing in MRV and the piloting, especially the piloting work that we are doing in a couple of other countries, and then what's our broader vision basically to extend support to many other countries that are interested. Very quickly, I think some of this information is already known, so you may not be known. Is like how countries NDCs are now considering the role of carbon pricing to meet their NDCs. So of course, it's very encouraging to see that many countries are identifying the critical role that markets could play when it comes to meeting NDCs, and I think many of the countries are in the process of now updating their NDCs. I think this is a great opportunity to see and incorporate properly the role that markets could play. I think some examples like Rwanda is already, well known. I think that is, I would say that I particularly like the way the Rwanda NDC is formulated and then how they recognize the role of different instruments can play. But the topic of our interest, I think, so this Marlon is very nicely summarized to different requirements under the Paris Agreement compared to the previous regime. But I think so. In addition to, of course, the different requirements that countries may need to fulfill, for example, under Article 4 and then Article 13, which is the, of course, core where the enhanced transparency framework and the reporting requirements are very large. But the work that we are also doing is to see how different reporting requirements under Article 6 also need to be taken care of, because in most of the countries, for example, in Africa, I think are already considering to see how Article 6 could help them to access carbon finance for mitigation activities, and based on the lessons that learned from the Kyoto CDM, and then there are many pilots already ongoing in Africa, including, of course, World Bank's pilots in many countries through our Carbon Initiative for Development. So here, the attempt that we are trying to make as part of our MRV support work is that how we can identify different requirements under these articles, and then develop a system at a domestic level that supports meeting many of these requirements. Of course, I did not explicitly list here, for example, Article 9, which relates to the climate finance, which is also one of the things that countries need to track and then report to UNFCCC. But the system that we are right now working in a couple of countries also have provisions to capture the different climate finance flows to different sectors in the country. So in order to meet these different requirements, which are much more significant and compared to the previous requirements, and hence the country's capacity needs to be increased significantly. And of course, one of the things that is essential for countries to have is necessary infrastructure that supports meeting these requirements. But having a infrastructure is one part, and then, as I think Stanford is very well articulated, and then the support the UN is providing when it comes to the capacity building and the institutional arrangements, etc., etc. And of course, I think in addition to that one, the relevant legislations and then regulatory setup should be put in place in order to ensure that the systems that are put in place and then institutions that will be set up functions properly. So this in a nutshell, I mean, like, no, though the topic for today is the national the MRV systems, but we see as the need to have a combination of MRV system and also the registries. Of course, there is still ongoing discussion and debate on whether countries should have their own registries or should make use of the central registry that UNFCCC may ultimately develop in the future. Of course, the requirements for that one is clear for Article 6.4, but what is not clear is that now for Article 6.2, for example, like where we see the role for having domestic level registries might also be useful. So this screen actually shows you how having this combination of MRV and registry system can help meeting different domestic requirements and also international requirements. So that is basically the premise that based on this one. So what each country needed is a market infrastructure based on a robust monitoring, reporting, and verification system, and supported by, of course, the registry that is configured as a peer-to-peer connected, of course. This, of course, don't get confused with this. So this is the terminology of a peer-to-peer connected meta registry system, because which is again a broader vision that at least what we have is that now, because in the spirit of the Paris Agreement, where bottom-up approaches are highly encouraged, especially under, say, for example, Article 6.2, where the transactions can happen between two countries, either bilaterally or, of course, multilaterally. And then in order to facilitate the transactions between those two countries and to ensure some of the key principles in the Paris Agreement, which is, of course, the avoidance of the double counting and then ensuring the environmental integrity, then how such transactions should get facilitated between those the parties that wanted to transact under 6.2. I think that's basically where this the connected systems will play a major role. But again, so which is what is very clear, and then I think that Stanford is also mentioned very well that the sophistication of these systems, each country ranges significantly because it also depends on the capacity and then the sectors that actually the countries wanted to include in order for them to develop these systems. So this drastically changes not only their ability to identify the needs, but also the finance that is required to build these systems. I think so. That is one of the first prohibiting factor that at least we witnessed when it comes to countries ability to implement these systems, because we have seen the costs ranging from $50,000 to $500,000 basically to develop these systems. And then on top of this one, of course, you will have a additional support requirements when it comes to the capacity building and also development of necessary policy and regulations to implement those things. So one of the core ideas behind our work and the MRV is also to how, given the capacity constraints that countries have and also the significant requirements under the Paris Agreement, so how actually we can standardize these MRV requirements. So here, sorry, this slide actually I took it from one of the countries that we are working in, Jordan. Basically, where we're trying to see how we align levels of MRV because I think one thing is very clear is that there are multiple levels of MRV requirements. That means starting from very straightforward at the project level MRV requirement to basically sector level, even to the individual ministry level and to the national level, where I mean the requirements will vary. I mean, so how actually we align these levels of MRV so that the ministry that is responsible to manage this entire data will have a clarity on how to make use of this data that will be collected for different purposes, including, of course, the reporting requirements under UNFCCC. And we all know the data is a big issue. Not only just identification of data, where from this data should be sourced, but also the data collection practices and also the quality of the data is very, very important. And of course, obviously, this adds more pressure on the resources that are needed to fulfill those requirements. So that is also one of the ideas, how do we actually simplify this process wherein the data can be collected with minimal effort. So that includes identification of some common data sources, building on existing systems and existing collection practices, identification of the gaps, and then help them to increase their capacity. And of course, they again to ensure that there will be central coordination, so as to ensure that the data flows are smooth, and then the accountability is clear, and then the logistics that are needed to be set up at the country level are minimal. And of course, the stakeholder engagement is one big piece. I think that's what also I understand. UN is also helping a lot, but in order for a country to develop a necessary MRV system, so the stakeholder engagement from the beginning, at the stage of needs assessment is very, very important. So that's basically the way that we are approaching in these countries where we are already working, developing MRV systems. So this is how actually the schematic of infrastructure at domestic level would look like. So at the project level, of course, there will be different ways of data collection, like meters, equipment, and the sensors. The system that the World Bank is helping to develop has an ability to collect these data remotely using sensors, or of course through the manual data collection, or if, for example, even directly hooking up to, for example, the SCADA system in this country, so that the relevant data, for example, for the power system can be pulled into the system very, very easily. And then all the data will be stored in the cloud environment, and from there we will have a centralized database, the MRV system, a user interface wherein the user can perform multiple tasks. And of course, the another thing that the system also facilitates is the validation of the data that each user will collect, and also the verification of emission reductions, and other data. So the main features of the system that we develop, I think this is I'm sure those of us working in this field is quite familiar. So the system basically, okay, just to also make it clear, the system that the World Bank is working is not a GHG inventory system, because inventory systems, there's a lot of work already been done, and then there's not much change to the way that inventories needs to be developed, and from the Kyoto and to the Paris Agreement. So there are already off-the-shelf inventory systems are already exist, but the MRV system that the World Bank is working on will integrate such systems if already exist. Of course, in most of the cases, we maintain an Excel-based inventory report that most of the countries report to UNFCCC. So the system connects that Excel sheet or makes it a part of the things, because that information is needed for us to track different things, like how countries performing when it comes to bending their GHG curve in different sectors, how their NDCs are doing in each sector. So the system basically will collect all the information related to the emissions. Of course, it collects data related to all the projects and the sectors, and it facilitates basically to add any GHG methodologies, and of course to capture co-benefits, and then as I mentioned, it pulls the data either manually or automatically where it is possible. It has a number of standard reports that are necessary to meet different reporting requirements that Marlon mentioned earlier. But also it also facilitates basically to develop customized reports with some third-party tools, and of course it links NDC linking or tagging to each of the activity measures that country is taking place, and of course it facilitates collection of all the documentation, and also then using that as a basis. For example, if a country decides that because data collection is one thing, and then getting it validated to ensure that the data is accurate and it meets the required QA, QC, and quality assurance and quality control measures. So it also facilitates that third-party validation and verification of emissions data. And then this MRV system will connect to the registry system. Of course, for example, if any of these information that is collected in the MRV system wants to participate in international carbon markets, be it for Article 6 or for CORSIA, etc. So then it will of course also facilitates tracking of those emission reductions, etc., through the registry. So the combination of the MRV and the registry, and then of course integrated with the existing inventory system, is what we think makes the complete infrastructure ready a country. So this of course these both systems will have a both public part and the private part, so that public can access certain information on how the country is doing when it comes to the emissions and the emission reductions in each sector, and etc. So that's also of course is pretty much possible. How actually we are trying to replicate this and then scale up in many other countries that are interested. So the idea behind this is to make this whole thing open source. So both the MRV and the registry system that we are working right now will be made it actually open source, so that any country that wish to utilize it can simply download this one, and then of course if any changes that are needed to be made, so then the countries can customize it. So this of course is the idea is to make it free to every country that wishes to have, because in many of the countries in Africa, for example, then of course it's good to see that today, almost like 50% of the participating countries in today's webinar have some kind of a system that's already in place or ready to work. But here the idea is to see having a basic structure in place to meet different requirements, and then build on that one to customize it to the requirements, or to the country specific requirements, is the most prudent way to do that one. So that's basically the idea, because the way we are developing is of course using IPCC methodologies, and then the envisaged requirements, for example, the Article 6, and then of course inventory is very clear. Actually, we know how actually inventory would look like. So how basically making use of this information so we can produce a desired results that will be much more useful for the country. So the system is so flexible that the countries can define their own process, from the data collection to quality control to the final approval of the data, and so that the system can facilitate that process, like who is responsible for what, and the system facilitates basically adding any new sectors, new projects, new methodologies, anything actually that country wishes to have. Again, it is again to meet the different requirements. The system is right now that we are developing in other countries basically already have the features related to the energy sector, transport, waste industry, and then of course to an extent on the forestry also, but not much on fluid, those kind of things. But of course it is because for example, the country that where we are working, they are not considering a fluid as the biggest source for them. So but the system facilitates that those additions and then deletions. So this is basically the idea. So that and before that one, of course, because countries also want to know whether the system that World Bank developed is appropriate for or not. So for that one, so we are right now working on making this directly access to the system to countries that are interested, so that you can play around with the system before you decide whether you wanted to have the system deployed in your country. So that's basically should be ready in 1 month time or so. Right now we have already received several requests even from the African countries actually on this one. So so please contact me if you are interested to know more about this one. Very quickly, I think through the PMR, so these are the list of countries that we are helping on MRV, and then the registries. Of course, these first two columns is what actually you can show. You can see that pretty much every country is working on these things. But I think, of course, in some countries, the MRV is completely different from what we are talking, because these countries are trying to implement, say, emissions trading scheme or carbon tax, where basically we need to have a facility level MRV system, which is slightly different from actually what I described earlier. But yes, so this is basically just to give a snapshot of different countries where we are working already. So some of the very quick lessons learned. I think these are already captured earlier also, where the countries that already have, but right now we are piloting this MRV system in for example in many countries that I just mentioned, based on that one. So these are the some of the quick lessons learned. But I think out of all these, that legal agreements are key. Basically, like how to ensure that the different users fulfill their requirements when it comes to the type of the data that they need to collect and then enter into the system, either manually or through Excel sheets, or where it is possible through automatic data collection practices, and then especially if you are trying to collect some data from the private sector or government departments, so having some kind of a clarity or some legal agreement or a policy or a regulation coming directly from the top is very, very crucial. And then we are also helping countries to develop such kind of a policy or regulation, how actually the MRV requirement should be considered in such requirement, such policies and regulations. So we have examples basically also to share. If any of you are already working on such kind of things, please feel free to reach to us. And then of course the QA/QC procedure, that's where the capacity building is very, very essential. So the way we define the capacity building changes from different levels of the users, like the training needs, for example, for the data entry operators will be different from, for example, the person sitting at the ministry level, who is responsible for ensuring the data quality, and then approval of the data is a bit different. And then of course the training and capacity building for the person, for the entity or agency responsible for the overall coordination. In many of the cases, it's the Ministry of Environment, as a DNA role. So that's the training. So the trainings are basically customized to different user profiles, and of course through the PMR. So we are helping these countries with this capacity building. And the idea and then the vision that we have is this that what we are calling is productizing these MRV systems, and then put it in somewhere in the cloud, so that interested countries can basically deploy in their countries, and then identify their customization needs along with the capacity building. So we are hoping this the support will continue under the next version of PMR, which we are calling as a Partnership for Market Implementation, PMI, which we announced in the last COP, and then we are hoping to launch it by end of this year. It will be again another 10-year program. So under which we are planning that to extend the support to a larger group of countries with respect to the customization and also the capacity building needs. And then the last point is definitely the interministerial working group, because that's very, very critical actually to establish before you decide on what kind of MRV system and be a registry system that is needed, to understand basically the needs of country and the features of the functionalities of the MRV system, and also what the legal or the regulatory support is needed to implement that one. So that's where basically this interministerial working group. I know that a couple of countries in Africa already have such kind of working groups, and then many are working towards establish such kind of things. So that's basically also what we have seen in many countries that we are already working. And then finally, the piloting is very essential. So please don't aim to have a system fully ready and then have all the functions and then features from the starting itself, because it's a long process, and then a lot of capacity is needed, and then and so that's for considering that one. So please start with some kind of a piloting with some sectors that are very easy to do. For example, power sector, which is very easy to do that kind of thing. So start to piloting, and then slowly ramp up before you have a full-fledged system that meets your requirements. So that's it actually from my side. If you have any questions or any further clarifications, or wanted to know more about what I just mentioned, please feel free to reach out to me at this email address. So thank you so much, and I will now hand over back to Stanford.
Stanford, are you still around? This is Suri speaking. Okay, so I'm not hearing Stanford, so I think what we can do is we can go into the country examples. Stanford already mentioned these and introduced in a way. So the first country example is from Kenya, and it's Yvonne from the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. Yvonne, please go ahead. You have the floor.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Just to quickly check if you can see my screen.
Yes, you're good, and I can also see your video feed.
Okay. afternoon, everyone, once again, and thank you to RCC for the invitation to present on Kenya's experience. I'll be presenting on progress, challenges, and lessons learned in the implemented framework here in the country. Just a little bit about me is that I am a project officer in charge of greenhouse gas inventory and clean energy access for the Low Emission and Climate Resilient Development Project. This is a project of the Ministry of Environment and Forestry through UNDP. I'll very quickly start by giving you a bit of a background about climate change governance in the country. Climate change in the country has been well organized. We have a national apex body, the National Climate Change Council, that is the apex decision-making body. Climate change affairs is coordinated by Ministry of Environment and Forestry through the Climate Change Directorate. As a country, we have also 47 autonomous county governments, and the County Executive Committee member is expected to coordinate climate change affairs at the county level. We have several frameworks that we have developed to coordinate climate change in the country, an interministerial committee which represents the coordination mechanisms for ministries, departments, and agencies. We have a county government coordination mechanism, private sector coordination mechanism, and a civil society and marginalized groups mechanism. These all come together to a national coordination mechanism that do reporting, prepare reports that should be submitted to the National Climate Change Council annually. In terms of the enabling policy and legal framework in the country, Kenya has ratified the Convention, Kyoto Protocol, and the Paris Agreement. We are also governed by our Constitution. We have a climate change framework policy, a climate change act that elaborates various climate change functions in the country, a climate change finance policy, and then of course we have sector-specific policies, such as the National Disaster Risk Management Policy, Water Act, amongst others. In terms of strategies and plans, we have a National Climate Change Action Plan. National Climate Change Action Plans are prepared every 5 years. We are currently implementing the second action plan for the country, which will cover the period 2018 to 2022. We of course have developed our nationally determined contribution, which we are in the process of updating. And then at county level, we have county integrated development plans, and at sectoral level, we have sector plans. So these are the legal policies under which climate change work is implemented in this country. So the basis for MRV in Kenya, I'll just talk about the context of NDC implementation. And in the context of our NDC implementation, which is implemented through our Climate Change Action Plan, we see MRV as being important to, one, monitor and measure, the implementation of impacts of mitigation actions. And we do this through our national GHG inventory. We have also adaptation actions being monitored, including information related to climate change impacts and vulnerabilities. And then, of course, external support needed and received in terms of finance. And like I mentioned, we have a climate change finance policy, and the Climate Change Act has established a climate change fund. So we want to monitor external support needed and received. So in terms of the challenges we have experienced, one challenge we have had is the lack of an overall framework for MRV system. We have previously had a complex MRV system in our first National Action Plan, which was very difficult to implement. So we needed something that's more integrated and simplified. And this, of course, then is the need that we had. Of course, there's also some danger that we've observed in terms of people working in segregation, sectors working in segregation, and therefore no harmonized output. There's various types of data required. And so we realized there's the need for guidelines on reporting and harmonized output, standardized forms of activity data collection and reporting instruments that are required across all sectors. Third, and not unique to Kenya, is the low level of capacity in terms of expertise, technology within the sectors to undertake MRV. This is obviously an issue across several countries where you find that MRV is a very complicated and new area, and the expertise is lacking. And where we have expertise, you find that they tend to move, and this has been experienced in the country. So there's need to strengthen capacity. to undertake MRV in the country. And of course, we need a robust and coordinated MRV capacity building plan so that you're constantly building the capacity within the country. Another issue we observed is unavailability of data and uncoordinated data sharing mechanisms. We especially observed this as we were developing our greenhouse gas inventory. And so data collection systems are required to ensure data availability, and of course, data quality control and quality assurance protocols need to be developed. In terms of funding, finance is required for mandate to be carried out, and there's limited funding for reporting by the government and institutions and at sector level, including county governments. So there's need first to establish a robust institutional framework so that there's adequate funds, which will then be able to be funded for them to establish to be able to carry out their mandate. And finally, of course, we have a Climate Change Act, like I mentioned earlier, but we don't have the subsidiary legislations for reporting. Therefore, the guidelines in terms of how to do our reporting have not well been elaborated, and therefore we require to develop this legislative framework to allow for mainstreaming. So MRV has been happening despite us not having a very integrated system. And I'll give you a snapshot of what are the processes that have been ongoing in the country. We have just completed our third GHG inventory, which will be for our third national communication to the convention. We have, of course, done our National Climate Change Action Plan, and we have done our report for this in terms of what has been done so far. This has been done this year. We have developed adaptation indicators. This has been mentioned by previous reporters. Adaptation indicators are really useful in measuring impacts of adaptation. And Kenya has been in the process of developing adaptation indicators, and we do have some in our National Climate Change Action Plan. We have also developed gender responsive indicators for our National Climate Change Action Plan. We have budget coding to track finance and support received. We have done our first public expenditure budget review for climate change. And of course, we have mainstreamed climate change into our national planning through our medium-term plan. For the first time, climate change has been mainstreamed. We have SDG reporting going on through the voluntary reporting. And we have also some efforts around land-based emissions estimation through a project known as SLEEK. So there's a lot happening out there, and this then gave us the need to have an integrated framework. So I'll give you a snapshot of how this integrated framework, what it looks like. It has 5 components. The first being the GHG inventory, which covers all matters to do with GHGs, including emissions by the sectors, all the 5 sectors. Monitoring and data collection is facilitated through the framework, through the platform. Emission calculation, analysis, and reporting. We have NDC implementation on mitigation actions as a second component, which tracks all the mitigation priority actions in our action plan. We also have a component on adaptation, climate finance, and SDGs. So you can see this is a more integrated framework that allows everybody to come on board and that we can have a more harmonized outputs. So the outputs that we expect from this framework are the integrated MRV report, an NDC report, which includes the national inventory report, the national communications, the biannual update reports, and financial and technical support. The tool that has been developed, which we have recently just validated for use, is an online tool. So cloud-based system. This allows for work to be done from all parts of the country without having to necessarily use a lot of paperwork, and the inputs would include the data, and this goes into the repository, which is online, and that is analyzed to come up with the 5 different outputs, and then we are able to have reports at all levels. This will be open to the public to access information, be it our inventory report, be it adaptation report, finance received, and it eases the country's efforts to be able to track the work that is being done in terms of climate change across the country. There's a lot of capacity building that will be required, and this is a process that is going to kickstart very soon. But some of the successes I'll just highlight very quickly, and lessons learned. For the greenhouse gas inventory, we were able to work through a learning by doing approach, where we were able to strengthen the local capacities to be able to develop an inventory continuously. The institutions involved are institutions whose daily work is in these sectors. So Ministry of Energy, Ministry of Industry, those involved in the agriculture, livestock sector, waste, and we were able to have very strong capacities built, and we are anticipating that this capacity will continuously be used for data collection. Some have been trained on how to do quality assurance and quality control, so we are expecting capacity for verification to continue to be there in the country, and less reliance on external experts to be able to do this process. So we are seeing this as something that is a lesson for other countries to mainstream greenhouse gas inventory processes in their countries. The other issue that we observed is linkages. Linkages are, of course, very critical in any work. And so one of the things that we've been able to do is, say that the team that we have built capacity for the third national inventory will be best suited to carry out work in the fourth national inventory and other ongoing inventory work. So we have developed a roster of experts internally of those who have been trained and whose capacity has been improved and built to be able to continuously offer this type of expertise within the country. The other issue that we observe is the need for continuous training of personnel. One of the things that we are talking about in the country doing is a continuous developing a robust claim capacity building mechanism so that we are able to continuously keep experts informed about new issues that are coming up, for example, the BTR, which will be a very different process, so that they can continuously have up-to-date information and be able to offer relevant work to the country. And then, of course, MRV is one thing that requires everybody to come on the table. And so we are talking about counties, private sector, ministries, and other parties, academia, who play a critical role in data collection. So for Kenya, one of the things that we are talking about moving forward is inclusivity, bring everybody to the table so that we can be able to have as much data being brought on as possible. And then, of course, one thing that we've realized is very important is coordination, and this has been mentioned previously. So developing strong coordination mechanisms, as I showed you in the first slide, is critical for us to continuously have a robust MRV system. And finally, we have the legislative framework. The regulation we are seeing as a very critical point of helping us have tools and guidelines on how reporting will be done in the country. So we currently have a Climate Change Act, but we're talking about the subsidiary legislation, which will have data collection template in the annexures, for example, that will define the type of activity data that we're interested in, the frequency of reporting, who will report, who will they report to. This type of information, we are seeing it as being the information that will be in the subsidiary legislation, and we have just embarked on this process, and we are seeing it as something that will help us have a robust MRV system moving forward. There's a lot we can share, but this is a very quick snapshot of MRV experience in the country, and I thank you for listening. Thank you, Asante, and I hand back over to the facilitators.
Thank you, Yvonne. I don't know if you can hear me now. I had a bit of a problem with my Wi-Fi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Stanford.
You're now back.
Okay, thanks very much, both Harry and Yvonne. I'm not going to go into a summary of Yvonne's presentations, in the interest of time, but I think I'd like to mention just the 3 points that countries can consider, for different levels of engagement, depending on their circumstances. The first is Climate Change Act that Yvonne mentioned, then need for a simple, robust, integrated MRV framework that is inclusive. And then she talked about legislative framework for MRV. I think these are very key points. There are quite a number of them, But let me just stick to those three as food for thoughts for other countries. So thanks very much. And by way of introduction, just briefly, Yvonne is a climate change and energy expert with 9 years of experience in management of donor-funded climate change projects implemented jointly by the Ministry of Environment and Forestry and UNDP in Kenya. So I think briefly that is just to tell you who Yvonne is. So our next presenter on the list is Per Nkusi. Per Nkusi is going to give us an experience of what they have done in Rwanda. And Per Nkusi is a climate change scientist with experience in climate change reporting and project management. She works with the climate change program at Rwanda Environment Management Authority, where she provides thorough technical support and day-to-day follow-up on ongoing projects related to national communications, BURs, and building measurements, reporting, verifications, and any other activity that is related to implementation of the UNFCCC. So please, Per, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Stanford.
Can you share your screen with us, Per?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thanks.
Okay. You can let me know if you can see my screen right now.
Okay, we can see the
Yes,
screen,
we
but
can.
not the first slide that is on the
Yes.
screen. Yeah, that's better. Can you put it on slideshow? Okay, that's fantastic. Great.
Thank you very much, Stanford, for that introduction. I won't take much time. My name is Musipal. I work with the Rwanda Environment Management Authority, and I'm going to share with you the institutional arrangements within Rwanda and the road we are taking towards strengthened MRV system. I have a bad connection, so I don't know if I can switch off my video. It's actually off. Okay.
Yeah, that might help. If you switch off your video, it could help. And anybody else that might be having their video on, if you can, please switch off your video. Thanks.
Okay. Okay. So I'll just give a bit of context. Rwanda is a country in Eastern Africa, with covering an area of about 26,000 square kilometers. We had a population of 12.1 million by 2018, but we project this to be about 15 million by 2030. Rwanda's economy is growing rapidly, and the climate situation in Rwanda is tropical. We have a tropical climate, and it's moderated by hilly topography. Like any other vulnerable country, we are receiving impacts of climate change even as we speak. So climate change is a very important global issue even to Rwanda. And because of this, we have taken action through various tools. I just highlighted 3 of them. We have the Green Growth and Climate Resilience Strategy of 2011. We have the recently published Environment and Climate Change Policy. We also have the recently submitted revised NDC and its MRV framework. So among these, there's also the law on environment, and these are guiding tools in the environment and climate change subsector. Without taking much time, I'll go straight into the institutional arrangements. As a non-Annex 1 party, we have obligations under the UNFCCC Convention, and institutional arrangements within Rwanda have been made very possible, easy, because of the robust national planning process that exists in Rwanda. So just to give you a bit of context, we have sector working groups that are led by the Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning. And within the sector working groups, we have thematic working groups. So within our sector of environment and natural resources, we have the Ministry of Environment as the chair, and REMA, which is the Rwanda Environment Management Authority, is the chair of the specific working group called Environment and Climate Change. So Ministry of Environment and REMA are key organs within climate change reporting as well. The third one we have, or the third and fourth, is the National Climate Change Committee and thematic working groups, which I'll talk about more in the next slide, if you allow me. So as I said, we have REMA at the Center of Climate Change Reporting, and it is responsible for implementation of national communication and biennial update report projects. We do this through the Department of Climate Change and International Obligations in collaboration with a single project implementation unit. So within the Department of Climate Change, we have 4 desks. You said, Sana?
Go ahead, Brad.
We have okay. We have 4 desks within the department. One is the climate change mitigation desk. We have the adaptation desk. We have the desk on climate data, and we have the international environment agreements desk. So these help us in implementation of national communication and biennial update report projects with the support of SPIU. So under the supervision of National Climate Change Committee, that's just above REMA and Ministry of Environment, REMA forms thematic working groups when we are preparing national communication or biennial update report projects. The thematic working groups are in charge of activity data cleaning that is collected from key national stakeholder institutions and other stakeholders. So the thematic working groups are formed aligned with the structure of either the national communication or the biennial update report. The biennial update reports. So they're in charge of activity data cleaning and processing, development of sector inventory and mitigation assessment reports, cross-cutting issues. So they really carry the heavy work of climate change reporting, and they work very closely with the technical team in DCCIO. So we have, of course, these projects are supported using JEF funds, and we work very closely with UNEP as the implementing agency for climate reporting projects. As I said, the national stakeholder institutions are very key in this process. They provide GHG activity data and information to thematic working groups and to REMA, and they work very closely with the National Climate Change Committee in validation of sector inventory reports and reports that contribute to chapters of national communications and BOR. The last one is the National Climate Change Committee. As I said, it works very closely with REMA and the thematic working groups in validation of sector reports, and then they compiled either national communication or biennial update report. So this chart was first used when we were preparing the third national communication. That's why you see the working groups are aligned with chapters within the national communication. But for the BOR, we adopted the same organigram, but aligned with the chapters of the biennial update report. So I'll just take you a bit into what we are doing currently, or what we have done towards an improved domestic MRV. Rwanda was the first country to submit our updated NDC. This only shows the commitment we have towards climate action and reducing the impacts of climate change felt by vulnerable countries and everyone else involved. So we committed 38% reduction in GHG emissions compared to BAU in 2030. We have about 24 adaptation interventions, and their respective indicators were also developed. An important part of this NDC is the MRV framework that was developed and documented within our NDC. And I'll go a bit more into it in the next slide, but I would like to highlight that it is consistent with reporting requirements of the UNFCCC, the very stringent requirements of the enhanced transparency framework of the Paris Agreement, and also national development strategies and plans. just to describe to you what the MRV framework, or specifically institutional arrangements for Rwanda's NDC implementation looks like. As I said, since we base on the sector working groups and the thematic working groups of the national planning process, we adopted the same for NDC implementation. So we have Ministry of Environment sitting at the top of this cycle and is in charge of RBME oversight. Just to explain a bit more, the RBME is the results-based monitoring and evaluation system that sits at Ministry of Environment. And this is just a platform that is used for data and information sharing and management within the environment and climate change subsector. So just below Ministry of Environment, as a chair of Environment and Climate Change Thematic Working Group, REMA will also be in charge of NDC MRV Technical Working Committee. So this committee is, if to explain just a bit more, it will be in charge of coordination of all national institutions and state actors that will be implementing actions within the NDC. So REMA will be in charge of nominating members of this technical working committee. The details of their roles and functions are within our NDC, and I encourage you to just take a look at it to be able to have more perspective on this. So like with climate reporting, we have thematic working groups under the NDC. We have the greenhouse gas inventory, we have capacity building and technology, we have mitigation and adaptation. So in addition, we have also the NDC finance. Like most countries, we have conditional and unconditional contribution that contributes to the 38% target. So we have a specific thematic working group that works together with the Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning and the Rwanda Green Fund to monitor and track climate finance. So other aspects, REMA will still be in charge of international reporting, that is the National Communication Bureau, will be in charge of reporting progress of the NDC, tracking progress of the NDC and communicating it to the Ministry of Environment and state actors. We have the National Institute of Statistics, which will be in charge of coordination of data collection processes and also in charge of development of data management procedures for the NDC specifically. So data quality control is also a responsibility of the National Institute of Statistics, and it will build on the quality control procedures that we normally follow in climate change reporting. Another thing that I can mention, of course, the thematic working group is made up of the key sector institutions we work with climate change reporting, but we want to take this further down to the subnational level where we'll have districts conducting data collection for NDC action implementation, and they will be able to report this to thematic working groups, and then it will go up the chain like that. So if I haven't said anything, I can answer questions in the chat regarding this, the institutional arrangements around NDC. We have some ongoing and planned activities within our actions towards a robust MRV. We have establishment of baselines for mitigation and adaptation actions in the NDC. This is supported by the ICAT fund. We also have emission factor development and intensive capacity building on domestic MRV, tracking NDCs, GAG inventory improvement, and the CBIT support. We will also be adopting improved GAG data collection procedures, that is, improving the methodologies and tools we currently use for climate change reporting. We'll also be developing a GAG data integrated platform, which will bring together the different sets of data collected specifically for GAG estimation and data management. This will also be under CBIT support. Just to share a bit of what we look at as our best practices, having REMA as the central organization and the coordinating body for climate change reporting and chair of UNFCCC, thematic working group, has really contributed greatly to having better institutional arrangements than what we had in 2005 when we had initial national communication. So we think that this is a very key aspect of improving institutional arrangements, having one coordinating body. We also working on something in its final stages, which is the ministerial order for national reports on climate change. This order will determine or is determining the structure of national reports on climate change, of course, in very close reference to UNFCCC reporting requirements, procedures for preparation of these reports, and the responsibilities of the organizations that are in charge of climate change reporting. So this is only to strengthen institutional arrangements that are existing, and it's something that we are really pushing to complement the work that it hopes to be done within the CBIT and ICAT related project activities. Just to share a bit, of course, like any other developing or non-Annex 1 party, we had a challenge, or we still have a challenge of limited country-specific data, specifically emission factors. We also have a problem of technical capacity in GHG inventories, mitigation assessment, and any other thematic area of the climate change reports. So these are addressed mainly right now addressed through support of GSP, as Stanford said, and training programs that are together by CGE. We are looking at improving, as I said, emission factors, and we are going to develop emission factors under CBIT support, so hopefully we will tackle this challenge. Lessons learned include the need to build technical capacity, of course, but specifically for data providing institutions and the private sector. We can't leave behind the private sector and data providing institutions, because these are key parts of the GHG inventory process and eventually achievement of NDC targets. We also feel the need for GHG data management is a lesson we have learned in climate change reporting and preparation of the NDC submitted recently. So actions within the CBIT and the ICAT look at GHG data management, especially for the CBIT project. Hopefully we will have a more data integrated system to be able to address data problems. I think this is what I had to share. Thank you very much. I'm open to answering any questions that you have. I'll give the floor back to Stanford.
Okay, thanks very much, Pearl. That was very impressive, and I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me? Sorry, could you confirm, please?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, okay, that's great. Thanks very much, Pearl. That was very, very impressive. And there are so many things that are very, very key, very important in setting up an MRV system. But once again, I just want to mention, 3 points that came across very clear to me. And one, which is very, very instrumental, is that you have operationalized your institutional arrangement. And this is usually quite a big problem in many countries. Many countries will give you an institutional arrangement that is so beautiful. It has this beautiful organogram, but it only exists in theory. But I see that in your case, you have taken measures to make sure that this is something that is functional. This is something that has been operationalized. And that's key, because you say that you have these thematic desks, which means you have people that have been assigned to particular thematic areas like GHG inventories. And these are key people in working with the thematic working groups, and that's very laudable. And then you also mentioned about the legal framework, just like in the previous case. You know, we talked about this, and this is very important. I'm glad to see that its importance is being recognized now. And the other very interesting thing is to formalize the stakeholder engagement. You even mentioned the private sector. That's fantastic. So I'm not going to go into much details about what you said. I'm sure we were all sort of listening to Bear. So without further ado, I'd like to go to the next presentation on lessons learned. And this is going to come from Ketiwe Kumalo from Eswatini. And by way of introduction, Ketiwe Kumalo is the Climate Change Program Coordinator with the Ministry of Tourism and Environmental Affairs Climate Change Unit in Eswatini. She is responsible for coordinating Eswatini's international climate change reports under the UNFCCC and Paris Agreement, of course, including the national communications, BORs, as well as the national greenhouse gas inventory reports. Ketiwe is also involved in updating and implementation of the Eswatini. Ketiwe, please welcome. The floor is yours. Ketiwe, just go ahead and share your screen. Okay, we can see your presentation now, Ketiwe. If you can put it on a slideshow. But you might be still muted. Just make sure you unmute yourself. Ketiwe, say something. We can't hear you. Ketiwe, I'm not getting any audios from you. Can you say something? But I still. Sahana, sorry, can you confirm? Can you hear Ketiwe?
No, I can't hear. I can't hear.
You can't?
I can't.
Okay, Ketiwe, we can't hear you. There might be a problem, please. Can you check that we haven't muted everyone? No, not yet.
I think you might have muted
Okay,
her.
let's see from my side.
She's muted.
Okay, she's muted. Ketiwe, unmute. Okay, we have a snack here. No, I haven't muted all, so I think she's free to. Okay, yes, we could do that.
Maybe you call her. Yeah, write us an SMS.
Yeah, let me try to quickly do that. In the meantime, while we're trying to get Ketiwe on board, so can we probably, sort of throw on the floor some questions that we might want to respond to?
Sorry, Stan, but we're just having a, were you talking to me? We were just having a power cut and a thunderstorm all at the same time. So I missed the last bit of that presentation, but I'm just loading the Mentimeter again, and I'll be with you in just a couple of minutes, or even less than that. If you were trying to hand it over, I kind of missed it.
Okay. All right. So what I was saying was that while I'm trying to bring you on board, if there are any comments, maybe now, rather than just being on silent.
Yes, Stanford, perhaps we can take 2 questions. I see on the Mentimeter. Would that be okay?
Okay. All right. I'm not able to see because I've gone back to my mailbox to try to contact you. Please,
okay, so
go
shall I
ahead
continue with just answering 2 questions then, in the meantime?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Okay, so thank you, Stanford. So let me just put on screen. I see that it's on screen. So there was one question about the MRV reporting cuts across national communications, etc. So could we? Okay, so let me deal with this question here first. So here you see this question on your screen, and it talks about the use of notification keys. Now, in terms of the modalities, procedures, and guidelines of the Enhanced Transparency Framework, you have available there in those MPGs some notation keys that you could use, and one of them is to use the notation key not estimated. And you would use these notation keys in the common reporting tables. Now, the common reporting tables are currently being developed by the SAPSTA and is due to be completed by the next COP. And in these tables, then you could indicate that you don't have information to report. And yes, so it's very important then that if you don't have information to report, you identify this as an area of improvement, and you talk about your plan to improve this area so you can report on more gases in the future. And you could also provide information on the support that you would need to improve this area. So this is what we are talking about earlier in the presentation, that about improvement, about reporting on improvements and reporting on support that you need. And this can then help you further develop your institutional arrangements so you can report in future. Okay, and then the next question that was posed was one on MRV reporting that cuts across national communications, BURs, and now the ETF. Okay, so shall I start and hand over? Okay.
Okay, Marlon, I think there is an echo. Are you trying to Marlon, unmute.
Stanford.
Yes.
Who is that? This is that.
Can you all mute your voice?
I just took the initiative and muted you, Stanford. Go ahead, Stanford. I just muted everyone, so maybe you'll have to unmute yourself, Stanford, and you can come back in.
Okay. All right. Okay, that's good. Okay, we seem to be having problems in touch with Katie because her cell phone is ringing, but she's not picking. So I would suggest that, because we don't know what the problem could be, if we just go ahead with the agenda, sorry, so that we finish this. We are already behind time anyway.
Exactly. Thank you, Stanford. I hope you can hear me. I've had to switch to headphones because the storm is raging outside, and we have a lot of background noise now. And also for the benefit of the participants, the link will be shared where all the presentations are. In fact, the presentation's already published, and I think in the chat box on the side you would have seen a couple of times the link to all of the slides. So they are available. So let me share my screen and we can get into the questions. I hope everyone can see that. Marlon, I only heard half of your answer, so I'm not sure if you already answered this part. So through the Mentimeter, we've already got about 15 questions, and this one is the most popular, and it's addressed to you, Marlon. It's I think it was from Manda from DFID. He's asking where a country does not have sufficient data for some of the 7 gases to be included in the National Inventory Report, can they list as not estimated, but include a plan for their later inclusion as part of continuous improvement? So I didn't catch all of the conversation due to the problems here. Would you like to take this question, Marlon? Over to you.
Yes, sure, Suri. Thank you again. So, yeah, this in the Enhanced Transparency Framework Modalities, Procedures and Guidelines, there is this facility to use notation keys when reporting on the gases, and so these notation keys are usually used in what we call common reporting tables. The common reporting tables are currently being developed by the SAPSTA, and once that is ready, then you could use it for submission together with your BTR. And in this, it's also correct to say that you should include a plan for continuous improvement, because that completes the information. So you are saying you have not estimated, and here are the reasons why you have not estimated. Perhaps you have some challenges with regards to collection of data or the management of that data to be able to report, or that you don't have the institutional arrangements in place. And then together with that, you could also report on support that you need to make those improvements. Thank you, Suri.
Okay, Suri, could I interrupt you, please? Because I have Ketia on speakerphone. Okay, so maybe I would suggest, to be fair, to give her like 5 minutes, just go through quickly her presentation, and then we go into the question and answer session. Is that okay?
Yes, you're absolutely right. Yeah, let her go through them.
Okay.
Okay, and Stanford, what I can do then from my end is I will project the slides from this end, so she has something to go on. Fantastic. Oh, you've got the slides. You've got the slides there. Someone's projecting. Good.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much, Stanford, and good afternoon, colleagues, and apologies for the technicalities. I seem to have a technical problem.
Okay, can't you put your volume of whatever device you are using, put your volume to 0 so that there is no echo.
Sorry?
Put the volume so that there is no echo, otherwise we'll have feedback.
Sorry, I cannot hear you, Stanford.
What I'm saying, your device, the device that you are using, the volume, just reduce it to 0. Otherwise, there will be feedback. Okay. Are you ready?
Okay. How is it now?
Okay, that's great. Okay, so you have this. So just go ahead. Soon we'll be helping with. Hear your device. Go ahead, Ketu.
Yes, thank you very much. Sorry about that. I just want to thank you for allowing us to share our experience. We are not so much advanced in present but we have our guests of learning from those.
Sorry, Stanford, the sound from Eswatini is quite difficult to follow. In fact, I'm not hearing anything at the moment other than a bit of feedback and squealing. I think we're going to have to shelve this presentation for now, considering the technical difficulties and the storms that seem to be sweeping across. And yeah, we're well over time now, and I think I'd like to allocate a little bit of time to question and answer. I think that's really the most interesting part of this afternoon's discussion. So I will go quickly, and I'll ask also that the experts are concise in their answers, and I'll focus on the most kind of popular questions. So if you allow me, I will go back to sharing my screen. And we have the question for Marlon. If you could just quickly address this, Marlon, about MRV reporting cuts across national communications, biannual update reports, and now also the enhanced transparency framework. Will this kind of overlaps create duplication, redundancy, and irrelevance in reporting systems? Focus on efficiency and effectiveness. So yeah, if you could just talk to this overlap. Thank you, Marlon, you have the floor.
Okay, so thank you, Suri. Yes, this is a very good question. And in the enhanced transparency framework modalities, procedures, and guidelines, there is one of these guiding principles about avoiding undue burden on parties and avoiding duplication. And so what this means is that if you have, let's say, reported information in your national communications or your BUR or even in your adaptation communication, but it meets the reporting provisions in the enhanced transparency framework modalities, procedures, guidelines, then you don't need to repeat that information in your biannual transparency report. You could just refer to those documents. So there is this ability for you to be able to do that. But of course, you know, there is a difference in terms of recency of information because of the different timelines in submission of this different reporting formats, national communications, BUR, adaptation communications. So you would need to look at that and consider whether you need to supplement, in some cases, the information that you put in your biannual transparency report. So in other words, you could say, please refer to our national adaptation communication report, but also note that this is the most current information that we have, and you could provide an update in your biannual transparency report of that information. Thank you, Suri.
Thanks, Marlon. So yeah, the founding fathers kind of had this in mind and had put these mechanisms in place to avoid this duplication in the way that, yes.
Can I jump in? Jigme here.
Jigme, yes.
No,
sure.
just add a few more words here. Good afternoon to everyone. No, I think this is a very important question here. It's because at the end of the day, all of this reports translate into effort in terms of both human resource time and financial resources. So it's really a good question, and my answer, straight answer would be no. There is no risk of creating any overlap or duplication or redundancy. That said, it is also important to ensure that you manage this properly in your own process. Now, why I say this no, for a couple of reasons. First, the BUR will be superseded by BTRs. So, as per the COP decision, once you submit your final BURs, and you start submission of your first BTR, from that point onwards, BUR and ICA process do not exist any longer. It will be replaced by enhanced transparency framework, which includes submission of BTR followed by technical expert review and facilitative multilateral consideration of progress. So from that point of view, there is actually no risk of overlap. That said, in terms of how you prepare for BTR, again, if you look at the modalities, procedures, and guidelines, BTR is nothing but a subset of BUR is nothing but a subset of BTR. So whatever you are doing now on BUR can very well serve as a foundation for BTR. On inventory, unless you're still using revised 1996, if that is the case, then you need to switch to 2006 IPCC guidelines. Otherwise, if you're already using 2006 guidelines, the switch from BUR to BTR is going to be fairly straightforward. And then on tracking of progress, what you now report on mitigation in BUR is going to be one of the elements of reporting under the tracking progress. So there is actually one, again, direct one-on-one mapping. So you can very well use the work, the foundation that you built now for BUR for your BTR. Now coming to this national communication, again, along with the MPGs, COP adopted a small accompanying decision in Katowice, and my sense is people tend to overlook that decision. But that decision is very important because that enables countries to harmonize reporting between NCs and BTRs. As per that decision, you can now report national communication and biennial transparency report as a single document going forward once you start BTR submission. If you do that, then for topics like inventory, adaptation, NDCs, including mitigation and support, those can be prepared and reported using the MPGs for the ETF. However, in addition to this BTR elements, in the national communication, there are other additional elements that you need to report. This would be things like public awareness, education, research, and systematic observation. All of this has to be reported as a supplementary information to the BTR. So for the purpose of national communication, then the reporting would include BTR plus the supplemental information, which would include information on public awareness, research, systematic observation, so on and so forth. So there is actually no risk of duplication at all, although we may have this different streams of reporting at the moment. That said, by substance, all of these reports are quite similar in nature. I think the big difference is basically in the political recognition, of the purpose, intent, and the legality. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Jigme, for adding some more detail to that answer. So now I'd like to move to Yvonne. We have a question here for you. Let me just bring it up on the screen. Just bear with me for a moment. So Yvonne, how was the integrated MRV tool that has been developed in Kenya with support from UNDP being utilised for reporting to the GHG inventory and other components? So this one was quite a popular question. I think you had answered it quite well in your presentation, so I think you can just briefly dwell on this. Thank you. You have the floor.
Okay, I hope you can hear me. Yeah, I did mention this in the presentation, and thank you for the question, is that the integrated system that we have developed has only just been completed. And so we are going to the next stage, which will be testing of the tool. We have completed our GHG inventory for our third national communication last year and validated that this year. And so we are anticipating that we will test run with that data, the GHG inventory component. We also have this report that has been developed for the action plan that covers both mitigation and adaptation. So we want to use that data to test the tool for its abilities to be able to produce the results that we're anticipating it to result. So just to mention one more time is that we have just only finished this tool, and so we are moving to the next phase, which will be trying to implement it first with what is available, and then moving forward, like for example, the fourth national communication, we anticipate to try and use this tool for that work. I hope that broadly answers the question.
Thank you, Yvonne. I think that answers the question nicely and also explains exactly where you're up to in the process of implementation with this tool. So I'd like to move on to the next question, and thank you everyone for hanging in there. I realise we're well over time, but I feel that this is really the interesting part of the afternoon. And I can see that we're still over 40 people that are hanging in, so let's try and get through some more of these important issues that have been raised. So the next question is for you, Stanford. How can one join the MRV network? Stanford, are you on the line? Can I give you the floor?
Yes, I MRV Networks, as an individual, if you are in a country where, which is a member of the MRV network, say you are a member of the MRV network. But organization, yes, it's raising with the GSP, with UNFCCC in terms of collaboration that we can have in implementing some of these capacity building initiatives in the region. So the member countries, so you are talking of Eastern Africa, MRV networks. So this basically brings in that particular region, and the countries have free will to join or say no, interested in this. But we have never had a case whereby a country clustered in a particular that they are not interested in being part of the MRV. Hope that answered the question.
Yeah, thanks, Stanford. You're breaking up a little bit. You're breaking up a little bit, so I didn't quite get everything, but I'm going to mark this as answered. And I think we can go straight to this one here, which is related, Stanford, also for you. Can participant lists of this be added to the regional MRV networks? So I think that was very much related, and maybe it was already answered, but I didn't quite catch everything on your end. But I think...
Okay, let me try again. So we have country of the MRV networks, and by virtue of the membership, all experts in the country become members of the MRV networks. So when we have specific activities, it's just up to them to decide, for example, for this particular activity, which experts are part of this. So if, for example, somebody is talking about being involved in the MRV networks, yes, that's very possible. It's open. All they need to do is to make sure that they are working in collaboration with the focal points in the countries, as well as whatever organization is responsible for handling MRV issues in the country.
Thanks, Stanford. I think that was clear. That was clear. So, yeah, if there's interest, go to your focal point in the country, and they will connect you. Thank you. We can move on. I quite like this one as well. What makes Rwanda different from all the other African countries when it comes to the implementation of environmental intervention? So, Nkusi, are you on the line, and are you able to see the question, and can you take the floor?
Yes, I'm around. I don't know if you can hear me.
I can hear you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that question.
I can hear you too.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. I think what makes Rwanda different, or what we are trying to do differently as a country, is one, we have national leadership or support, political support in the implementation of these of environmental conventions and interventions at national and subnational level. So I think it's a very important thing to point out, to have a national leadership that sees the impact of climate change on economic growth, and immediately, links it and sets up institutional and policy frameworks to address environmental concerns or global issues such as climate change. I also think that, as I said in my presentation, the robust national planning process that we have in Rwanda, I don't know how it is for other countries. I know experience from some African countries, but this process, or this institutional coordination at national planning level, enables the environment and climate change subsector, or the sector itself of environment and natural resources, to embed or to build institutional coordination based on the national planning process. I think it's a very key thing that I can mention has contributed to strengthening institutional arrangements and brought us this far from where we were in 2005 when we submitted the initial national communication, to 2018, and to now when we're preparing our biennial update report and submitting the Rwanda updated NDC. And this also applies to other environmental interventions and climate change mitigation and adaptation projects. I don't know if this, if I've given it more perspective, but I feel like the key, those two key aspects of how we go about things here in Rwanda has helped or has supported the environment and climate change subsector. Thank you.
Thank you, Nkusi. I think I want to take one more question and then we finish it here, considering the how much we've gone over time already. So I'll just take you to one more question, and it's also for you, Nkuzi. Here we go. So how have you operationalized the tools that have been developed?
Thank you, Surya. This question is maybe a little bit more into the future, because we are currently looking at developing tools such as the national MRV system and GHG data integration tools. We have a results-based monitoring and evaluation system that is run by the Ministry of Environment, and we use this as a data and information sharing platform, and it supports climate change reporting processes and also implementation of environmental interventions. So the tools that we're looking to use or to operationalize are in the future. We have the NDC MRV framework, which we have documented, but still needs to be operationalized in the near future. So we are currently in the process of developing tools, or have developed and looking towards operationalizing these tools.
Thank you, Nkuzi. I think that was the end of your intervention. I, for one, definitely look forward to seeing that being operationalized, and maybe something we can exchange on at a future event. So with that, I would like to move on from the question and answer. I'm aware that we've still got 10 outstanding questions, which are also would be very interesting to go through, but I think in the interest of time and people dropping out of the call, we'll have to move on now. But what we will do is we've got a record of these questions, and we'll go to our experts and seek answers for them, and we'll post that then on the event page, the link of which has been shared a couple of times already, and which we will also then distribute to you. So what I'd like to do now is go to the next Mentimeter slides. So just very quickly, I would like to do a rapid survey. The results are hidden, so there's no, and the results are also anonymous. So please just go ahead quickly and punch something in. We've found a survey after the event usually doesn't get much response.
Sorry, if you can just allow a couple of seconds for people to get on their phones, because the first time it went very fast.
Yes, you might have to find your phone, and it's menti.com, yes. And the code is there at the top. I hope you're able to access it. Okay, yes, it looks, I can see 2 people have put something in, 3 people. So yeah, the results are hidden, so there's no way that you can embarrass us by giving us low or bad or negative feedback right now. But we will be able to see the results later.
This is important.
So you can be truthful. Okay, let's give it 10 more seconds. But this is already more than we got in the usual survey that we send out afterwards. So this is good. Okay, thank you very much. And then in a similar vein, if you enjoyed the webinar today, we'd also be really interested to know if there's anything else you'd like to learn about or hear about. Just put in some suggestions here for any future topics you'd like to know about. We can assemble the experts, especially if it's under the UNFCCC process, and put together a program. So we'll just give you a couple of moments to think about that. If it's more about the ETF or the MRV systems, maybe something more specific, or something CDM related, like last time when we did a webinar on the standardized baselines. We'd be interested to know, as we want to tailor the topic as much as possible to our audience. Okay, so we've had some responses there.
As mentioned, this is a response you have to enter the dialog box of your phone.
Yes, look, I'm seeing a few more people coming in, so that's good. I'm going to leave this slide on, but I will continue talking. So if you think of something, just feel free to punch it in. We'll still get it. So in closing, sorry that we ran over time now by 60 minutes, and seems we had a couple of technical hiccups along the way, but thanks for hanging in there and persevering, and especially thank you to the experts, and sorry so much, Kwetsebe from Eswatini, for not being able to deliver your presentation, but as mentioned, we will share that afterwards, the slides. So maybe we could take this opportunity and turn on our cameras and just give a quick round of applause. I'm very much aware everyone was on mute, so sometimes it feels like there's no one out there. I'm going to turn mine on. So
no, I'm there. We're there.
And,
thank you very much
maybe,
indeed, and really thank you.
Thank you, and maybe you can unmute yourself as well, everyone, and we can give a little.
Thanks everybody.
much.
And if you're able to project yourself, here's Sana and I. If you're able to project yourself, we can also take a screenshot, which would be very nice. I'm getting lots of feedback now and background noise, so you're all there. Okay, I've asked Brenda, babies crying in the background. Yeah, I know all about that. So Brenda, please go ahead and take a screenshot. Some familiar faces there. Good to see you all.
Thank you so much, Christina.
Okay, and then just in closing, I want to give a plug for some events that are coming up. Just very quickly, on the 19th of August, we've got a regional technical examination meeting on mitigation. It's on climate smart cooling solutions for sustainable buildings in Africa. And we've got examples from West Africa, Rwanda, South Africa, Kenya. And then on the 30th of September, we have a Gender Integration International Climate Actions. This is a regional event run by the UNFCCC for Sub-Saharan Africa. It's going to be in French and in English with simultaneous interpretation. And then also we're planning a closed meeting for members of MRV Networks. This is something that Stanford and I and a newly recruited UNV addition to the team will be preparing, and yeah, this will go out to the MRV focal points. So sorry for that last rush at the end, but I'm just very aware that the clock is ticking, and we've taken enough of your time this afternoon. But thanks again, everyone, for joining, and I hope you were able to learn something. I certainly did. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your afternoon and all the best. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Suri. Thanks, Anna.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Interesting.
Thanks.
Bye. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.